You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
All right, people, you know that sound. Welcome to another edition of Unfiltered, the Unfiltered Band. It is trade deadline season. We are counting down to August 2nd, where fans will either be happy with what they did, or let's be honest, 99% of them will be upset because none of their GMs did exactly what they had planned, and all hell has broken loose, as they said in Ghostbusters, because I know I'm dealing with a movie buff, and who also is about the same age as me. Dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria, to quote Ghostbusters, is pretty much what the deadline is. We welcome in Sweeny Murti. Sweeny, I want to talk deadline with you, but I got to start with the Subway Series. It's for especially for us who have covered it, I think. It's gotten stale over the years, right? It's after they met in the World Series, it hasn't been the same. I wasn't there, and it's rare that off TV or the internet you could feel an atmosphere that's not a postseason. Tell me if I'm mistaken. That seemed like the best atmosphere in the opening of this Subway Series that this series has had maybe since the World Series in 2000. Is that over-exaggerating?
It's pretty close. I think the key is that this is literally the first time both teams have met when they're both in first place. It's never happened before. Even in the years when you're talking about 99, 2000, remember the Mets were running second to the Braves and got in through the wild card. So they were never in first place together. And then you've gotten patches where, like in 15, the Mets were good and the Yankees weren't. And in 06, the Mets were good. The Yankees were, I think, climbing out of a bad start. They haven't met in this in the same situation ever. Which, I don't know that I know how to rank the last.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's a feel thing.
But at the beginning of the game, I think you're right, because it was like Hagler Hearns in the first round. And you've got Judge and Rizzo hitting home runs, and you hear the Yankee fans go up. And then you have the Mets coming back, and Alonso with his double, he's pumping his fists on second base. This is the first inning of a game in July, right? And this isn't. I've seen these guys. I've seen players do this in like eighth inning. Ninth inning big hits. They don't do it in the first inning,
right?
So. And then the home run that Escobar hits, and he's rounding the base. He talks about later about feeling like he's in a World Series. I felt two ways about that. Like, I love that he said that and he felt that, but I also wanted to pump the brakes a little bit because, when you get bigger, so slow down a little bit. But I love the fact that they're getting jazzed up by it. The park did feel different, even just going into the park yesterday. I think, we anticipated sellouts for both games. And I think you're going to anticipate the same thing next month at Yankee Stadium. There's just certain regular season series. And I think you always know that when you're the Yankees, the Red Sox bring it out of you. And the Mets don't always, because sometimes you're talking about, a third place team or something like that. And this felt a lot different because both teams are where they are.
Yeah, I hear you on Escobar. I think when I heard that, and he's one of the more likable vets in the game, but he's played a lot of time in Minnesota before they were good, in Arizona, and has not played in a World Series. And I think that was, to him, it kind of makes sense. You know what I mean? In his own mind, that's probably as close as he's come. Yeah. The personalities, and I want to just follow up with this because obviously Max Scherzer, and happy birthday, he gets the birthday start in this series. You mentioned Pete Alonso. The personalities. Right, Aaron Judge, who I know is a quiet, humble guy. Alonso is also, but they're larger than life in size, right? That helps too, doesn't it? Because if you had a lot of, the Yankees have been at times over. Look, Paul O'Neill and Jorge Posada for me on the outside were always fun because there were a lot of guys on their P's and Q's on those Yankee teams. You wanted some outside of that. I think the personalities in this rivalry are a little bit more vocal than they normally are. Your point to Alonso, who seems to be so emotional the way he plays.
Yeah, and that certainly helps. It draws the fans out for sure. I just think that, listen, you're talking about great players right now. Okay, you're talking about MVP caliber players, and I think we sometimes forget that because I think when we tend to look at a baseball team, especially, and we talk about, the eighth place hitter and the guy that makes contact and the guy that I did a show the other night with somebody, and they were talking to me about, listen, Jose Trevino and Isaiah Kiner-Falefa have made, amazing contributions and are really good players. But I think uh, it was almost insinuating that that's the difference between this. Listen,
Right.
Aaron Judge has 38 home runs.
Right.
23 home runs.
Yeah.
Giancarlo Stanton, even with a couple of injured list stints, has over 20 home runs. These guys are hitting the ball out of the ballpark. And the Mets have Pete Alonso who's hitting the ball out of the ballpark and driving in runs. And that's when you have it's still star driven. Okay, I mean,
Mhm.
baseball is a little bit different because you need and can highlight contributions from players all the way down. So it's not like basketball or football in those regards at times, but you you still need your stars to be stars. Like every champion, Tom Brady can't, throw for 110 yards and 3 interceptions and have his team still win. You know, okay, Aaron Judge can go 0 for 4 and his team can still win, but probably not a lot. You need your stars to perform, and the Yankees and Mets both have stars who are performing.
Yeah, everybody loves Luis Soho. He's never had to buy a drink in New York, but that stuff happens in October, right? I mean, that's to me when those kind of stars and Brady can make David Patton into something who the Giants released, but you can't do that as one player. Just ask Mike Trout, right, for the Angels. I want to talk about. Let's start with the deadline with the King injury, which was obviously just so tough to take. How much does always you're looking for pitching depth, no matter what. But how much do you think that advanced things in terms of not just the starters like a Castillo, but depth in general, maybe with multiple arms for the Yankees here as we get closer to the deadline?
Yeah, I think I think it was always going to be something they were going to look for, but King certainly puts it in a different light. Now, there's Ron Marinaccio pitched very well in Tuesday night's game, and he's been pitching really well. Last year, probably I'd say at the end of August, I asked somebody in the Yankee system. I said, tell me a guy in the minor leagues that for me to highlight that I haven't, that's kind of off the beaten path that maybe I haven't talked about this year. And the name I was given was Ron Marinaccio. He was added to the 40-man roster at the end of the season, and he's gotten a chance this year to really. He's getting a chance to pitch bigger innings because of whether it's King or Chapman being ineffective, anything else. At this point, he's getting a chance to pitch in more high leverage spots and bigger innings. And so far he looks the part, and we'll see how he responds as the season goes along. I mean, just really good. I love watching guys throw changeups because it's just fun to watch a hitter flail, and I like that's his out pitch, so it's fun to watch a guy like that. I kind of liken it to Tommy Kahnle, the way he used to throw for the Yankees a few years ago.
Yep.
It's right-handed relievers rarely, out pitchers rarely. Trevor Hoffman, I'm sorry, you're awesome, but it's rare to see a relief pitcher have that as his out pitch, right? So I feel like he's a big factor. Jonathan Loaisiga, I thought, was going to be a guy who, if the Yankees wanted to in the last offseason entertain trading Aroldis Chapman to a team that needed bullpen help, I thought they could have and maybe should have done it because Loaisiga was ready to ascend to a closer role. He was that good last year. Fortunately for the Yankees, they didn't because one, Britton was hurt and he was going to miss most of the year. Zach Britton is probably going to come back in September and actually, can help here too. But, Loaisiga ended up getting hurt for a good chunk of this season too. He's back now, and I think he's one of these guys that you have to look for. So this is a long way of me telling you that in light of Michael King's injury, Ron Marinaccio and Jonathan Loaisiga's emergence here again, very important. It doesn't totally eliminate their need to go out and look for more help, which I think they will.
Let's talk about the sixth inning guy, Aroldis Chapman. I can't. You have to try and find value, right, and instill confidence. I remember years ago talking to, and I'm going to make a comp of a closer who was around a long time and then kind of lost it. Although Fernando Rodney was like 80 years old and resurfaced not too long ago, a couple of years ago with the Nationals. But I remember talking to Joe Madden during the years where it seemed like they were always having to instill confidence to the public about Fernando Rodney blowing saves and how you do that. And for managers, it's difficult. I got to put him in a spot where he's going to succeed. What is that spot? I can't hide him. If I put him in down 5 runs, I could lose his confidence more because he knows he's at the bottom. How much is all of that really a huge problem for the Yankees now? And is this a scenario where we see him not even part of this scenario and story down the stretch as we look at the next few weeks here?
I think they've actually tried to bring him into some of the lower leverage type of situations. And sometimes that's detrimental with these guys because they rely so much on the adrenaline of the situation that they're in. The Yankees have played a lot of close games, which means the low leverage situation for Aroldis Chapman is down a run in the 6th inning. Not, okay, listen, at 2, you need to get some outs, but you can't bring in roll out all your high leverage guys. Even if you're down 4 runs, there's value in those innings because as a team, you need somebody to pitch those innings so that you don't over your other guys, right? So now that's not what Chapman is being paid for, but you still have to, as long as you're in this spot, you still have to figure out how to get the value out of him. So you bring him into these situations that you're talking about. It hasn't been consistent enough. He has a couple of, okay, that was good. And then you're like, oh boy. Really, we made a lot of us made a very big deal about Garrett Cole and the adjustments he had to make last season after the crackdown on Spider Tag, right? Nobody accused Aroldis Chapman of doing anything, but you can draw the straight line from the crackdown last June to now and see the drop-off in performance. That's anecdotal, but it looks real. So I guess there's no way of trying to figure out how consistent he can perform for you right now. And as you're out there looking for other options, listen, you dealt taking calls and things for a long time about, how teams react to their needs in April, May, and June. You don't fix problems in April, May, and June. You kind of Band-Aid them, but even if you have players that you don't think are going to be with you long-term, you're still rolling them out there in April, May, and June because you can't just keep churning.
That's right.
You have to move with it until it's time to move. You have to jump when it's time to jump, not because you're just going to churn through more. Injury just destroys everything. So you kind of got to roll along. It's the kind of situation with Joey Gallo. Joey Gallo are not championship run. I'm confident saying that. The Yankees, that even if they're on, they bury guys like that. Jacoby Ellsbury and Dellin Betances were buried in 2017 in the postseason run. Ellsbury was coming off a fantastic September and still had, was nowhere near the top of the order or center field when the playoffs started. Betances, who was so amazing for the Yankees for 4 years, had struggled in the second half of the season. Playoffs started, they didn't use him in big spots. So that's me telling you that you can get all wired up about Aroldis Chapman and Joey Gallo coming into games or being in the lineup in June and July. In October, they're not going to be in those spots because they see exactly what we see, and you're just getting to a point now with the deadline where you can start to make those moves to jump and figure out what your roster looks like.
And you have to react to what the guys are doing at the time. I think of the San Francisco Giants. One year, Pablo Sandoval is a star, and the next year he's hitting 8th. 1 year, Lincecum's your game 1, and then he's coming out of the bullpen. Yeah. Right? So you never know what the roles are going to be. But to your point, I used to say, like with the Phillies with their division titles every year, the Joe Blantons of the world, right? Those guys, those 5th starts, they get you the division titles. Even if they're not on the roster or the last guy, they are a huge part of it. Like when they give the rings out, those guys always have value. My question is, do you think the Yankees need to go at the front end to the Castillo? Do they need somebody at that level? Because we know what it's going to necessitate value-wise to get him or a Frankie Montas. Are they better suited, in your opinion, Sweeny, maybe a couple of smaller deals versus that one guy who might take a crux of maybe what you're willing to give in terms of farm and prospects?
It really depends. I mean, I feel like they do need some more reliability in starting pitching. And at this time of year in the market, that's getting a star type of guy like Castillo, right? They've had some guys who have started, like Jameson Taillon was probably the most disappointing one over the course of the last month and a half. And like that's a guy who looked so good, and you thought he was going to be an all-star in the beginning of June, and then he had a terrible month of June and carried into July, and it hasn't really gotten a lot better for him. So the fact that that's happened, that Luis Severino is dealing with an injury, that's cut into a lot of what is really the reason. One of the biggest reasons the Yankees are where they are is because their starting pitching has been outstanding all season long. They've struggled a little bit lately, so now there's this. Now you have to figure out what what your solution is. Is it this little midseason dead arm period type of thing? Do they recover from that? Is it all the kind of the compilation of the COVID seasons of 20, 21, 20, now 22, kind of with the workload trying to, is that coming to a head, and maybe they're not going to recover as well, and are they going to have poor second halves because of that? Those are situations that smarter people than you and me are trying to put all the information into whatever model they want and try and figure it out. They're looking at saying, okay, what's it going to get Luis Castillo and or Frankie Montas, and if we do that, we have to go get, can we still go get Juan Soto, or do we go at some other outfielder that we want, Tendi or whatever like that? So yeah, I feel pretty good, though. I've seen Brian churn over rosters at the deadline that were just contenders, not record in the league. So when you have best record in the league and you have a chance to go for it, knowing that you got here with still some pretty significant holes in your roster, I'm pretty sure Brian Cashman is going to churn over this roster at the deadline. You're going to see, four, out of 26 players, you could see 4 or 5 different players in here in a week, and it's not unheard of. And even guys that you felt pretty good, like Josh Donaldson is a really good defender right now. His bat has not taken off. He had one good stretch, I think, in May, early June, and then he got hurt again with the shoulder, and it just hasn't really come back strong. So are there better options there? Isaiah Kiner-Falefa has made some key errors in spots. Now, the overall numbers, I guess, is fine for the position. Shortstops are going to make errors, but is it a place where you could get better? Is there an option to get better? I think you have to look at those things. So, yeah, they're going to be moves, and I think Yankee fans are generally fearful because when you get to this point in the season, they haven't made moves. You're like, oh my gosh, they're not going to. Like, history tells me that they're going to.
I one follow with that, and I'll let you run. And I appreciate all this time. When we go back to as kids growing up, when you start, really concentrating on the Yankees when we were young, you think about the pressure under George Steinbrenner, right? I remember reading the papers where I don't think people who are young that are Yankee fans now truly understand that you could open up a paper in the Year Post, there would be an article where George was apologizing to you as a fan for the team sucking. I mean, literally, like nobody. I think people think that's probably some urban legend, and it's not, as we know. The pressure. I'm curious, from the pulse that you have, what do you think that it is level-wise? Because as soon as it went to Hank and Howell, we didn't feel it as much, right? But you think about it, when you mentioned Chapman, I thought of the Brasso homer and the Rays taking them out. You think about a 60-game season where everyone thought if anyone is going to walk through this, it's the depth-laden Yankees, and they were gone, right? The Red Sox winning the World Series a couple of times since they were there, beating them in the postseason and playing New York as Aaron Judge, right? Is there a pressure level? It's not what George, it would have been crazy if he was still here, but is it higher than maybe we think, even though we're not hearing about it vocally as much, for them to do something with this team this year in October?
I think so, because if you think about it, this is really just figuring out how to say this. This is kind of the end of the run that started in 2017. You remember, that was the baby bombers, right? Brian Hoke wrote a book about it, right? Mm-hmm. That was Aaron Judge's Rookie of the Year. That was Gary Sanchez, and you had Gleyber Torres coming up the following year. This is the young Yankees ready to, young Yankees win championships. Historically, mm-hmm. Everybody. Every star player you can think of that came up as a Yankee, with the exception of Don Mattingly and Thurman Munson, won championships within their first 3-4 years, multiple championships within their first like 4. Thurman ended up winning a couple later on. That was, he came up in 70. They won in 77, 78. So he was a little bit older at that point. And Mattingly, as we know, never got to a World Series. But DiMaggio, Mantle, Berra, Jeter, all those guys, right? You're winning multiple championships in your first 4 or 5 years. Aaron Judge is now in his 6th year. Gary Sanchez is gone. Gleyber Torres is not far away from, he's in arbitration now, not far away from making, this is what, 18, 19, 20, 21, 20. This is, almost his 5th full season. So you're talking about trying to reach what you haven't yet, when as a historically as a franchise, that, it moves a lot faster than that. But, a lot of things happened. The line isn't always straight up. Plus the COVID seasons, I think, changed everything for everybody dramatically. Now the Yankees have kind of recovered, because remember, 18 and 19, they won 100+ games. And they just got knocked out by, other teams that were really good, because that's allowed to happen too. Other teams are allowed to be good. And they got beaten by, World Series champions World Series teams in those years. So you get through 18 and 19, and 20 happens. It's crazy. 21, they just never got it together. They couldn't hit for whatever reason. You want to talk about the ball, coming back from the COVID season, whatever, a lot of different things. They never struck offensively like they are this year. Now everything's coming together again. So what you saw as the straight line, we thought, Case, from 17, 18, 19, has now kind of jumped the track to 22.
Right.
And now you're seeing that, Aaron Judge is, 3 months away from being a free agent, and you better do something about winning right now with him. And that's the pressure to me. That's the pressure of, they started building something. I've long said that, a Yankee fan who thinks that the next World Series is going to be followed by 3 or 4 more in a row is making a big mistake. The sport is not designed that way anymore. In fact, they started changing all the rules after the Yankees last did this.
That's correct. It's why the Giants couldn't do it, and they were one on, one off, one on, one off, one on, one off 3 times.
Yeah, and that is hard to do.
Yes.
Okay, like that's, and the technicality. I don't ever like referring to the Giants as a dynasty, because you didn't defend your championship. I think you have to go back to back at some point to be called dynasty.
Yeah. Yep.
But what they did was amazing.
They're like the San Antonio Spurs-ish is kind of like the comp I make, right?
A little bit, yeah. I think they were amazing in what they did, but the sport's not designed that way anymore. They strive for what they call competitive balance. I think it's mislabeled. I think it's more mediocrity at times than competitive. But I feel like that's the thing that we're looking at as we kind of try and judge the Yankees against their own history, is that, okay, here come the Yankees, and now here comes the next run. No, like they, 2009 was another good example. They won a World Series, and then, they went back to the ALCS, 2 of the next 3 years, but then everybody got older and they had to start over again. This is going to be a weird little thing, because, you've got Aaron Judge is over 30, young Yankee stars don't win their first championship in their 30s. So, again, I'm sorry, really long-winded way of me.
No, you're right, because everything's in cycles, Sweeny. And I know I appreciate all this time. I think about the Phillies, right, during the Ruben Amaro years. Those 5 years, right? Now, look, the Yankees didn't win division titles all these years, but they got 5 division titles. They were in 2 World Series, won 1 right against Tampa, lost 1 to the Yankees, and then what? Then they hung on too long, but they disappeared, right? And now it takes a while, and you come back. You get like 5-year stints.
The Phillies did the same thing the Giants did, and the same thing the Yankees did, because once you win with a group of players, there's a lot of pressure to keep those players, and you have to re-sign them. And once you re-sign them, then it costs more money, which hurts your ability to go replenish the rest of your roster, and they get older. They continue to get older. That's just what happens. And at some point, you pay for it, like the Giants did, like the Phillies did, and the Yankees did. Even though they never had losing seasons to go with it, they managed to do a lot of other things around it. But that's what happens. Listen, ideally, the Tampa Bay model would be awesome, right? Where you just keep turning through a roster, and don't get attached to players for different reasons. But the Giants, the Phillies, and the Yankees all are high revenue and high big market teams where they could afford to re-sign, Jimmy Rollins and Ryan Howard and Pablo Sandoval and all those other guys, and all the Yankees players, But eventually that bill comes due, and that's what you see with these teams, that you hang on to your stars because they're your stars. That's where your brand was built, and your fans are coming out to see those players, but they're also coming out to see them win. And winning gets harder as the group gets older.
Sweet, appreciate you.